Joining me now in studio is James Woolsey, who served as director of the CIA during the presidency of Bill Clinton. He was also the ambassador and U.S. representative to the Negotiation on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe from 1989 to 1991. Welcome to the show, Ambassador. Thanks so much for coming in.
Sure.
Is this the new normal? I mean, are Americans basically to expect that something like this can happen? I mean, the fact of the matter is there was this lull from 9/11 until now. But something's going to slip through the cracks. I mean, we just have to be vigilant. We have to know that it's a possibility.
I'm afraid this is going to be with us for some time. Jihadism, which is really what's going on here, is an outgrowth of one of the world's great religions. Certainly not all Muslims are jihadis. I knew slightly the late Abdul Rahman Wahid, the former president of Indonesia, who was an amazing spokesman for liberty and religious religious tolerance, as strong as the world has seen in recent decades. But we have a situation in which, partially because of the basic education that some Muslims get, partially because of the radicalization by some imams on the web, the Qadari and so forth, Al-Awlaki, who was killed by a drone strike several years ago, but he radicalized a large number of people. In this virtual world of the internet, you don't have to have people get together around a table to plot how they're going to blow someone up, or who's going to do what, or to be radicalized by being told that you have to go on jihad or you're not a decent person.
You were CIA director when the 1993 truck bombing happened at the World Trade Center. I mean, looking then to now, could you have looked in your crystal ball at that time and seen what we're seeing here in the United States?
It was clear that something bad was starting to happen. Ramzi Yousef had gotten away, and the mastermind of it, and a lot of our effort was in working with the Pakistanis and others to try to find him, and eventually we did. But we, as a government as a whole, not the CIA particularly, should have done a lot more right then and started looking into the sources and the materials. For example, the FBI didn't have any, or maybe only had one or two Arabic readers, and there was a lot of material we learned later that had been captured and put in a closet in headquarters that came out at the time of the first World Trade Center bombing, and could have given us a lot of leads to a lot of terrorists. It was really a shame.
Well, let's go there, because Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, says that the FBI dropped the ball. They were aware of the older brother. They were tipped off by the Russians. I guess hindsight's 20/20, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing one of the FBI officials said is that Justice Department guidance really required them not to continue to pursue the investigation and to shut it down. One wants to know exactly what the wording is, but the Justice Department back in the Clinton administration also issued guidance which made it very hard not only for the CIA and FBI to cooperate on things like counterterrorism, but for different parts of the FBI to cooperate. And in looking at what happened, 9/11 and the balls that got dropped between one organization and the other, we did it to ourselves to some extent. And I don't know whether the fault this time was with the Bureau or Justice or Department of Homeland Security or which, but the system doesn't work when you can't work together with your sister agencies.
But it was redesigned so that it would work. It still doesn't.
Well, what was redesigned was the intelligence community. The job I had, Director of Central Intelligence, back until about 2005 or so, you were essentially the CEO of the CIA and the chairman of the board of the whole intelligence community. And what Congress focused on and decided was that that chairman of the board wasn't powerful enough. You had to make him more powerful so he could get these dadgunned intelligence agencies all working together. Well, first of all, they weakened it in the House of Representatives a good deal. So the current chairman, the current director of national intelligence, has somewhat more authority, a bit more authority than, say, I had over other agencies, but not a huge amount. And the other thing is that they created the Department of Homeland Security, but they put so much into it, some 27 agencies, that it has a hard time getting things done. Last time I looked, there were no senators, and there were only about 5 House members who were not on an oversight committee of the Department of Homeland Security. So, you know, it's hard to pull together when Congress, in a sense, is pulling you apart, and also when Justice Department directives, in some cases, say, hey, you can't talk to one another.
Well, there's some reports that are circulating that that he may have, when he went to Dagestan, he may have met with the bin Laden of Russia. I'm sure you're probably hearing the same thing. And that seems like that would be a tip-off to the agencies that, hey, this is a red flag.
Well, you'd think, and if the FBI had not closed the investigation, they might have had somebody staying attuned to this, and maybe even to what he was putting on the web, and a number of things. But they closed it down, saying that was the way they're supposed to operate under Justice Department guidelines. And not having seen those, I don't know whether it was their decision or justices or whose, but clearly the Canadians did a lot better job. The Mounties tracked these 2 guys who were going to blow up the train, who got caught just 3 days ago from Toronto to New York, and watched them and kept, I'd rather imagine, wiretapped them and so forth. And then when it looked like they might be on the edge of doing something, they didn't just watch them anymore to try to pick up who might talk to them. They grabbed them. The Mounties in the Canadian system looks awful good compared to ours.
Well, let's go there, because I know you've talked about how Israel should be sort of a model for the United States. Why wouldn't they embrace what they're doing there?
Well, I mean, the Israelis put a lot of effort into this. I talked to a friend of mine who used to be in security at Ben Gurion Airport for Israel, and I asked him, what's the difference between Israeli and American airport security? And he said, well, the Israelis are looking for terrorists. By implication, we're not. We're looking for things, bombs, whatever. But TSA employees, we've all seen it and laughed at it. They stand there frisking 85-year-old ladies and babies and so forth, because they're not supposed to have a profile or a code. I have 3 sons in their 30s, and when 9/11 hit, they were in their 20s, and they said, Dad, look, everybody who blows something up is a young man. We'd be glad to be searched every time we go on a plane. Why don't they at least focus on the young men, even if they're not going to focus on somebody's religion or so? I said, I don't know. It makes sense.
Well, even late Senator Ted Kennedy, who was on the watch list, had problems at Reagan National, which you know, obviously isn't in his 30s. But isn't that a problem too? These watch lists, it's like 500,000 names on there.
They're really hard, and a lot of them sound or are very similar, or they'll be spelled one letter differently if, say, it's an Egyptian versus a Tunisian. They're just a lot of difficulty and complexity, some of which we can sort out with computers and scanning and translating material and so forth. And I think the bright side of what happened after the terrible explosions in Boston was the way not only the 30 or 40 police departments in the Boston area pulled together and worked together, and the FBI with them, but the way the citizens pitched in, and how many, everybody's video phone was scanning around, and they were able to put together pictures of the 2 perpetrators, and by putting them on the web, it made them decide they had to run. And in running, they killed one of themselves, and they killed a policeman at MIT, and it was terrible. But it was only that, I think, that really flushed them out. The younger of the 2, 2 days after the bombs blew off, went to school, went to college, talked to all his friends, sat and chatted about the bombing, went to class.
What about this attack against Al-Qaeda, identifying Al-Qaeda as the enemy? I mean, I think the American people like to have an enemy that they can identify with, and bin Laden, his death, it's much deeper than that, isn't it?
Of course it is. The administration plays to that desire to have a single enemy and also to win. I mean, their narrative, as I guess they might say, is that it was never a war against terrorism generally. It was a war against Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda attacked us. We fought Al-Qaeda. We defeated Al-Qaeda. We killed bin Laden. We killed a number of the other senior Al-Qaeda people. War is over. Anything else that happens is workplace violence. So that you have somebody like Major Hassan down at Fort Hood, who's clearly a radical Islamist. He lectures his fellow students and medical students about radical Islam. He has calling cards that effectively say he's a jihadi. As he shoots his 13 co-military people at Fort Hood, he's shouting Allahu Akbar. How is he not an Islamist, and how are we not at war with him? But the report that the government prepared doesn't mention the word jihad, doesn't mention the word Muslim or Islam, and the administration will not even award the Purple Heart to the people who were wounded by Hassan at Fort Hood.
So quickly we've run out of time, but what's the answer?
The answer is we've got to call it straight. We've got to stop this political correctness nonsense. The first step to being able to defeat a movement like the jihadis is to call them what they are and stop dancing around it.
Ambassador, thanks so much for coming in and joining us here on The Heat.
Thanks for having me.